of us. And usually when people are in a position like that, they have sense enough to kind of not try not to kill each other, but to try to look out for each other. And if we look out for each other, that also ends up having a positive intellectual impact, right? The work advances not by trying to kill each other, but by trying to look out for each other.
And to teach them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for what you just said. I mean, I've been experiencing the pangs over the past 2 days, but it's also been, I've also felt like you've given me the compassionate and generous space to have those pangs and not, because when I talk, I noticed that, and this was before you and Jared started your imprint, dialogue, that if the room was set with respect to various camps, that all one camp had to do is to say, well, Fred Moulton says, and then I'm in this position of having to not, you know what I'm saying, either having to hold my ground and be defensive or feel like I'm disintegrating in some way. So you've actually, your performance here, you've actually shown us how to do something different. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate that because I said to someone that you were going to come in here and toss me and Jared like salad. And so I was very, very, very happy about the title of Just Friends. And I'm also happy that you didn't actually play the instrumental version as opposed to putting the lyrics on it.
Yeah, we bracket the lyrics and set them aside.
Huh?
We bracket the lyrics and set them aside.
So I have a question that I feel comfortable asking now because for two reasons. One, I think the answer to it is probably in what you said yesterday and today, but I'm just not coherent enough to actually, to actually have heard it clearly to figure out how to make this. And it's how you would, or how we should think about the protocols of psychoanalysis that run through Fanon's work, given what you've said today about pigeon languages, and not the protocols on their own terms, but what he does with those protocols, and what David Marriott in particular, bringing in another perhaps Afro-pessimist, does with this. And I'm thinking about the end of the essay Fanon's War, where Marriott says, "What do you do with an unconscious that appears to hate you?" And I read the word "appears to hate you" in a kind of double way. It appears, perhaps it hates you, and also that when the unconscious appears, it hates you. So that the metaphor of that you talked about here, and that Jared wrote about in his article about the guy coming on stage intervening in the intramural space is precisely how Marriott talks about the condition of the black unconscious, is that there's this constant dissipation, which means that perhaps it cannot become an unconscious because the dissipation is such that blackness cannot generate its own ego ideal. So he takes Fanon's work and then leaves Fanon's dream of disalienation aside to do the analytic work without even gesturing towards prescription if that's what you're doing. So I'm wondering, can this gap be calibrated, or is it a gap, or must we just think of what you've done today and what Marriott does in a kind of creative tension?
Well, if I understand what David's doing, and also the question, I actually think the tension is less. It's see what psychoanalytic tools allow, I think, both Fanon and David to discover is precisely this inability or incapacity for an ego ideal in blackness. Um, and then I think this is the place where I would, for in my mind, they both would deviate from psychoanalytic protocols and practices, precisely in deviating from, let's say, what I would call the normativity of Freudian prescription, which is, okay, how do we fix this, right? And um, and the answer that I think that they both approach is we don't fix this. That what instead we do in a way that exceeds psychoanalysis, I think, is to first of all provide a much more accurate and thoroughgoing understanding, and even you could say diagnosis of the ego ideal as a kind of imposition, right? And again, this is where I think that you could see in Fanon a deviation both from psychoanalytic protocol and from phenomenological protocol, where on the level of psychoanalytic protocol we would talk about an ego or ego ideal. Phenomenologically, we talk about kind of transcendental subjectivity. In either case, we are barred. We do not have this capacity. And then the normative, the prescriptive level from within those norms or from within the normativity of those discourses would be, well, how do you get one? And I think that, and they're not interested in that, and I'm not interested in that either. And it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in something that I guess you could talk about under the rubric of prescription, but it's not. And this is where, again, David's work, your work, Jared, Fanon, and then it allows me to see things that I had missed and not understood, maybe even like in Du Bois and in Douglas and going all the way back, where I'm kind of going, okay, what's at stake is how to begin to provide a better understanding of what now, the language that we have to talk about this now is the language of absence, language of nothing. What is this absence of an ego ideal, right? What is it? How do we talk about it? What are its features? What are its qualities? Okay, how does it work? Okay, what happens there? How does it exist as a mode of living in the world? How does it exist as a mode of study? Okay, how does it exist, frankly, in my understanding at least, as an alternative to the world, insofar as it is constructed out of and by the impulse and the imposition of the ego ideal, which is radically, brutally, viciously interdicted for blacks. You talk about as the void of our subjectivity, but which I think the work of Deleuze and Derrida, Foucault, and people like that have established is that it is in a different way, by way of different means and different forms of brutality, there's a general interdiction. Like probably the most and we have to talk about this because I want to know what you think, because I think I might be misusing a term that for me is so important in your work, the notion of antagonism and the distinction between antagonism and conflict. And to talk about that antagonism as the antagonism that structures the relationship between blacks and civil society, between blacks and the world, insofar as it is between blacks and what Fanon calls the morbid universe and its production of the morbid body. But I want to, and this is kind of what I was getting at in that sort of aside about privilege, right? And I don't, and I want to see if I can put it in the. when Theodore Roosevelt, well, that's a different thing. But what I'll say is this, like what's at stake is recognizing what I have tended to call, along with my friend Steve Harney, we write stuff together, the notion of a general antagonism. And maybe the relationship, which is to say that there's a very specific and particular antagonism that exists between blacks and civil society. And then there's the general antagonism that is civil society, which manifests itself as all the different ways in which we've got people who have the ego ideal imposed upon them and who live within within a political structure which utterly denies the capacity to construct this ego ideal. Now, we are barred from it and excluded from it at a